Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to do a bit of an update on where I've gotten to with my little layout here. This is I guess, the bad news portion of my video. Um, as you can see, I've got all kinds of problems here. I've actually turned this into a bit of a NASA lunar lander, wrapping tinfoil around pretty much everything. So this was me attempting to do a servo motors SG90s run by an Arduino Uno, and I've pretty much tried everything. I've twisted the wires. The gist of what's happening is I can run the servos and do the switches no problem via a push button, and I can run two servos off of one push button no problem. However, when I turn the track power on, the servos go wild, and best I can figure is that the DCC signal running through the track is interfering with the signal coming from the Uno on the bottom here and just causing the servo motors to go crazy. So what I've got now is an SG92R instead of an SG90, and they're supposed to be a bit more isolated. And the other thing I'm going to do is have the wire coming off the bottom of the servo instead of the top near the baseboard. So hopefully that works. I haven't tested it, but maybe tonight I will and let you guys know how that goes. So that's the bad update. I'm getting nowhere on this thing. Then I'll move over to okay, so that was the update on the shelf layout I'm building. I also went to the Ancaster train show last weekend and managed to pick up some pretty nice stuff. So I'll just show you what I got. First up, I got a pair of sulfuric acid tankers, and these aren't Athearn Genesis. These are the ready-to-run ones. I picked these up for very cheap, and the reason I got that so cheap was because some of the railings were broken on the top. So I've just had to basically replace the railings, and I ended up doing all my details as well on the ends. So I put on my hoses and my coupler cut bars, and I have an Athearn Genesis sulfuric acid one, or not a sulfuric acid one, an acid tank car, what is it, the pink and white one. Anyway, and I just copied the detail on that, and so I did that for all of them. I like these cars because they have metal stirrups, and they're quite sturdy on the end. So I don't think they're going to break ever. So I just started weathering these guys. I got one. They're both the same number, but I'll renumber them when I get around to it. Anyway, so I got these for pretty cheap. So I like my tank cars. I always try and pick them up when I go to a show because they're usually a lot cheaper than buying them new. And I got another tank car here. It's another Athearn. Did the same on that. Maybe you can see the end detail better on that one. So I just do my own coupler cut bars, and I put the brake lines on. Put on Katie, I think these are 119s, the scale shelf couplers. And I painted the trucks and wheels. That's about all I've done for that one. And then the fourth one, I always kind of wanted one of these things. They're hard to come by. He actually had a 3-pack, and I should have bought the 3-pack. I wasn't sure what I should do, but I only bought the 1-pack, and I should have got all 4, actually. But, live and learn. Anyway, I wasn't feeling too extravagant at the time, so I only bought one. Anyway, so again, done the end details, put the coupler cut bars on. Now for ready to run, they obviously don't have the braking detail underneath that the Genesis ones do, and they don't have the roller bearing caps. But I find that I'm losing the caps anyway, and they're kind of a pain. So I think these are probably the best way to go for me anyway. And it turns out that there was actually a lot of brake detail on the ready to run one on the 2 black ones. So good score there. And then I also ran into this. So this would be number 3 here. I've done 2 of these already, and this is 42988. And this guy actually has some turquoise step going on. So I'm going to weather this one up, and I'm going to do all the windows and everything, and I'll post that one in a future video. But this is how they look when they come out of the box, pretty much. Well, except for I've done the couplers already, and I've done the wheels. So that's the five pieces of kit I got from the Ancaster train show. quite good value, and really pleased with what I got. Okay, now this is what I really wanted to show. I just finished these last night, and I think I'm pretty happy with these guys. So these are, I was only planning on buying one, and I ended up buying one, and then another one came up for sale that had an ESU decoder in it instead of the Tsunami 2, so I snapped that one up, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do with two of them? So I got 4641 and 4643, and of course, I think one of them has been scrapped because it fell off the rails, and then the other one has been repainted. I think 43 got repainted into the CN livery. So yeah, the two that I bought, they're not on the rails, and so I had to convert them into 44 and 42. So that was a bit of an effort, but they were mechanically sound. They sound amazing. This guy especially here, he's got just a stock Athearn speaker in it. It just sounds amazing. It's got some thump. I want to do the speaker in this guy eventually, but this has the ESU decoder in it, and this is a Tsunami 2. So eventually I'll get around to doing that. But yeah, I did post some pictures on Facebook, and some of the guys are asking me how I did the burn mark specifically. So I'll have to go through, and I guess if you guys have the time, I will explain what I've done to these things. It's probably about 25 hours total on these guys. These were not easy to do. But again, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I had both engines fresh out of the box, nothing done to them except for the decoder install on the one. But of course, because it's 4643, I had to take off the numbers and renumber it. I had to do, well, I thought I could buy the BC Rail decal pack from Microscale, I believe, but it turns out that they're for the older versions of the BC Rail locomotives, and the size of the numbers on the cab is only half as high as it needed to be. So I didn't buy that. I ended up having to scrounge around in my drawer to see what I got, and I had some black numbers. So I only did the 4 and the 2 I did the last number on the cab, and it was fairly close match, but they were black, so I actually had to paint the numbers after I put them on. I had to paint them on, and then of course, stupid me, I put the numbers on, and then I went to do the fade, the red and the blue. I faded down on both locomotives, more so on 44, got faded more. But as I peeled the tape off, I peeled the decals off, so I had to start again. So anyway, lots of trials and tribulations on these two, but basically decals and then the fade on both. And then I started in on the detailed painting. Yeah, trucks, I think you guys may have seen if you've been following along. I painted these guys completely black on 4644. And, my son came in and said, hey, those aren't black. They're kind of a silvery black. So I ended up scrubbing all the paint off those, and I actually liked the effect. But as it turns out, I got more photographs. They were kind of more black, so they've been airbrushed again. So that's the trucks. I guess I'll work my way up from the bottom. The diesel fuel tank is a combination of brushwork and airbrushing. This kind of reddish orangey color here is Tamiya. This would be hull red mixed with yellow, flat yellow. Go easy on the hull red, otherwise you're going to be mixing a huge pot, because you don't need much hull red to get this color. You need lots of yellow. And that's the color that is basically prevalent on 4642 all over the place. The trucks, the side frame, the long hood, the short, the cab, everything is that hull red plus yellow. So that's that tone there. I pre-painted the line work on the cylinders, the air cylinders, and the fuel tank with just a brush, a fine brush, and then I airbrushed over that, and then threw on some powders and some oils just to kind of get the tones going. I airbrushed all of the walkways with that same kind of either the black-brown mixture, this NATO brown and rubber black from Tamiya. And those two combinations of colors are pretty much seen throughout the entire engine here. And that's the front ends as well. So these are, yeah. Okay, picking up where I left off, my sister-in-law came over. Sorry about that. That was a bit of an interruption there. So anyway, yes, using those two combinations, basically it did all the basics of the weathering on these two. On the front here as well. So this would be the NATO brown and rubber black on the plow, and if it's everything below the anti-climber, and then above was kind of a very light dusting of the hull red and the yellow, and that just gave me the basic starting point. Other things that I've done, I guess, moving the way up, there were some quite unique features on these engines. One of the things that drew me to 4642 was, I guess somebody, they'd obviously driven through quite a bit of mud and grime, and this thing got plastered head to toe with this kind of orangey dust. And somebody came along with either their hand or a wipe and put a bunch of happy faces from the front to the back. And then somebody else came along and called it the Spirit of Lucy. So Spirit of Lucy's in there. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I'll zoom in. I thought that was pretty funny. So I like the sense of humor on this, the conductor or the engineer here. So there's the Spirit of Lucy. So that was just basically put on with the airbrush and then scratched in with a toothpick. I found the toothpick was probably the easiest way to just remove the paint and leave the white behind. As you can see now, obviously detailed on the visor, and they've had some replacement parts added over the years. I'm not sure what this red was, but there's some paint peeling there. Interestingly, I think this is actually sand that may have been dropped when they refilled the sand filler hatches here. They probably dropped the hose up here. It was an overhead thing. Dropped a pile of sand on the cab roof. What else interesting thing happened here? Yeah, the diesel tank on this one was quite detailed. I thought it was quite interesting. Lots of streaks coming down. Looks like the soot from the roof is making its way down this crease, under the walkway, and down the diesel fuel tank here to add a bit more. Obviously, this is diesel fuel spillage. A lot of grime happening on the top. This was done first with the craft paint, the black craft paint, and then gone over with powders and just blended in. If you see my previous video, you can see how I did the panel lining. That was, again, acrylic craft paint, lots of water, kind of a wet process. This was the BC rail flag. So this one was done by adding a piece of tape to cover, or scraping off the BC rail flag, adding a piece of tape, and then using powders around the tape and then peeling the tape off. So it was kind of a negative effect. That's how that was done. The roof is obviously just, this is pure rubber black sand, or airbrushed on. And what else do I have on here? Oh yeah, okay, so the rear end, I gave a bit of treatment here. So this is a feature that I added that wasn't stock standard. So each one of these things came with a end of train device holder, and so I built a little end of train device out of some square stock. So that's reflective tape, and that's just painted black, and there's a little antenna, and there's a handle on the side. So that just added a little bit of detail for the back end. Again, had to renumber 4642, and 4644 got the end of train device as well. So we'll just flip it around, and now I guess I'll explain how I did the burn mark. So I'll just zoom in so you can see that. And thanks to everybody on Facebook who posted the most recent photographs. So this thing is actually 12 months old now. I think it's a year old. And so it started, most recent pictures have shown it started to rust. So what I had shown on Facebook was the non-rusty version, basically fresh from the burn, because that's the photographs I had. But now I've updated it a little bit to show some age, some rusting over the past year. So what I did here was I had some photographs of both sides of the long hood. I never got a photograph of the roof, so I'm just guessing up here, but basically a pencil outline of everything, penciled around here, and I went downstairs, and first thing I did was take my rubber black and spray paint the entire area black. And then I went back over the black once that was dry. It didn't take long. And I went over with white. Again, it's to me a paint. And I went over and sprayed the whole thing white except for the fringe. So I left a little black fringe around the edge. And then I switched over to silver, again to Mia, and I blotched the silver on all throughout, just little blotches, random blotches. And then I came upstairs and I started in with basically the airbrush left a lot of kind of fuzziness around the edge, and the burn is actually a clean line. So I just got some 70% isopropyl alcohol and gently scrubbed the edge so that it was a straight edge along the bottom and all the way around. And then I switched over to, I used these acrylic pens, these Pabio ones. This is the yellow, obviously, that I used for the end of train device, but I used a black pen, and what I do is I daub it out and I use my fine detail brush, and that's what I lined the entire burn. I lined that with that Pabio acrylic paint. I find it's really nice. It's viscous, it flows really well, and it paints really well. So I used that to do all the fine black detail. And then I also have a white Pabio pen, and so obviously I can't paint this fine line, but what I can do is touch it up. And so anywhere I needed a really fine black line, I touched up with white. And I made the black line super, super thin just by painting right next to it with white. And so I must have gone over this. I spent 5 hours doing this burn mark. So I just kept going over and over the black, the white, and the gray until I got something that looked very close to what the photographs were. And I had layers upon layers upon layers. And after a while, I started relaxing and not worrying too much because I knew that if I screwed things up, I could just repaint it. No big deal. And some of the repaints were actually they looked actually better than the photographs, I think. So just relax and just keep painting over and over and again. And I did have to touch up the red because I made some mistakes, so I had to airbrush that in some places. Anyway, I got to the point where you guys have seen it on Facebook, and that actually, sorry, one more step. Then I did wet the roof, and I started dropping on grays and other colors and tones and browns, and using a lot of water and just kind of like splashing it around, trying to keep that circular pattern. The flames seem to be kind of in a cloud pattern. They seem to be doing that. So I painted on the cloud pattern, and I brushed on drops that look like clouds, like drops over drops, kind of like almost like a bunch of grapes kind of thing. So I got that look going. And then when I was satisfied with that, before I added any of the brown tinting and the rust, I actually taped off the burn mark, and I dull coated the burn mark only. And interestingly enough, I've not dull coated any of these locos except for the burn. That's the only thing I dull coated. I haven't even dull coated the tanks or anything like that. And I don't think I will because they're actually quite sturdy. Anyway, yeah, once I've got that dull coated, let it dry, then I started applying Winsor & Newton oils, and I just used the raw umber and very, very light raw umber, like a small pinprick of raw umber, like the end of a pencil, and a drop of water. And so super, super liquidy, just to give it that ever so slight tint. That's all I did, just a tint. There's no powders on here. It's just Winsor & Newton. And the tank, the stack here is the, what is that one? That's not the raw umber, it's the sienna, the raw sienna, the red one. Anyway, layers and layers and layers, patience, lots of time. But eventually you get there if you want those lines thinner, you just got to paint up next to them. The only powders, actually, sorry, I did use powders. I put some what do you call that? Light rust, I guess, along the bottom. These 5 panels, actually, I did some light rust here and then brushed it up and down because there is kind of like a rust mark there. And that's basically how I got there. So airbrushing to me acrylic, so it was black, white, and then silver. And then these Pabio pens in black and white, just to do all the lining. And then I used gray paint, white paint, and black paint, just in various, solutions. Finer the better, like more wet the better. And then eventually you start getting this whole thing going on. And then once you're happy with it, seal it up. And then I did the final Winsor & Newton coating on that. That's how I did the burn. So it's kind of similar to like what Dan on Dan's Railroad 2011 does. It's layers, man. Like there's no way around it. You got to do layers. So the front of this engine here actually has, you know, layers here too. So this is the same Winsor & Newton starting point. I taped off this line vertically because they've repainted on the cab here white. But yeah, it's acrylic dots to start off with, and then some Winsor & Newton fine, like barely any Winsor & Newton oil on there to get the orangey, the raw umber, and then just come over it with lines of other paint. And then if you're not happy, what I do is I scrape with a toothpick. If it's too fat, I just scrape with a toothpick and make it really thin. So, you know, you can work with other tools once it's dry too. You don't have to get it all done in a wet process. If it's dry, you just scrape. Anything you don't like, you can scrape off with a toothpick. But, you know, obviously don't go too crazy because you'll scrape the paint off. That you any other layers you painted on. The factory paint's still pretty good. Anyway, that's how I did that. I added lots of decals. So these are new. Tons of decals around here. This was like some kind of a warning thing. I think this is the 4642 actually has this as it's actually a horn. I didn't know that, but I guess this is where the horn details are. Right here it says horn, and it says that on the prototype. Interesting thing on 4642 as well, there seems to be a broken off mirror here, and they just got the previous mount left on. So I made this out of my my sheet aluminum. I really like using sheet aluminum. It's thin. It's thinner than you're going to get with styrene. And I just put it in the pliers and bend it, and you can get really fine. It's like when you put it in a brake and do downspouts and stuff. You can just do the brake with pliers. And so it's got a nice dull side that takes paint really well, and the shiny side really takes to CA. Ooh, it sticks like crazy. Anyway, so I like using that. So that's what that's made out of. Just a piece of aluminum, bent and broken. So yeah, I know I've forgotten something I wanted to tell you guys about these, but oh yeah, I just finished up the plows with a bit of spatter there. So that's just grabbing a cheapy brush. Actually, is really good. It's got nasty bristles. They're kind of stiff, and it's really great. So I just got a toothpick and the brush and just kind of hold the toothpick and flick the brush off the toothpick. So that works really well. Yeah, I think that's about it. But other than that, like, I think these are the hardest ones I've ever done. And of course, I had to do 2 of them, right? So I can't just do 1. Anyway, so I'm pretty pleased with these. They run really well. I got to do some programming on them to get them to consist well. But I don't think you'll ever see these guys together in real life. But maybe on my railroad you will. I did see 4644 last March in my backyard, and that's what kind of inspired me to get this thing. I saw the burn mark. I'm like, ooh, I want to try that. So yeah, it's done. I can't believe it's done, but it's done. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the explanation. I wasn't too long-winded. That's it for my update now. So have a good night, and like and subscribe if you wish. Please do. And have a good Thanksgiving weekend to all you Americans. Thanks.